move on. So when I was asked to prepare for this, the initial thought was, are there specific strategies that I can offer or particular techniques that I can offer? And what I thought might work better, just given how I understand how things work, would be for us to have a conversation. So I'm hoping that what I will learn from you is a little bit of what's most pressing on your minds, and that we'll have an opportunity to think together and work together on finding strategies that will work for you and your families. I threw out a couple of questions that I get asked frequently, and here they are on the screen. I feel really fried. I'm feeling, the edges are cracking. I'm just getting so weary. I have COVID fatigue. I have Zoom fatigue. I don't really know that I have anything to offer. There have also been questions about, do I need to be worried about the screen time? I used to be pretty vigilant about monitoring my kids' screen access, and now that's just gone out the window. There have been questions for me about kids' social and emotional development. Will they still learn how to socialize and interact? How do they navigate so much time on their own and in isolation? Similarly, everybody in their own silos, working independently, doing their own thing, it just doesn't feel like a normal way to relate and to interact. And how could that be okay? And what would the long-term implications be? And then, just honestly, like seeing forward ahead, I'm thinking of the holidays, I'm thinking of the cold weather and being indoors, and I just don't know how this can possibly be okay and how we can recover. So take a moment to just think about some of these questions and ask yourself if these are the things that are on your minds. And if not, please take a moment to just think and put some questions in the chat box. You can click the chat box. You should see it in the bottom of your screen, and raise some questions to make sure that we talk about the things that matter to you. So I'll just give you a moment for that, and then we can advance the next slide while you're thinking. So sorry to ask you to multitask, because I do want you to have the time to kind of reflect on what you need and what you want to get out of our time together. These are some articles that I have seen in the last month that I found helpful. The titles are on the next slide, so you can take a look at them that way as well. But the links are here. They'll be put in the chat box. If they speak to you, great. If they don't worry about it. But you may find, at least I did, little kernels in each of them that were useful to me. I'll talk more about that in a few moments, but I want to give you a chance to just take a look at the general theme of them. And then if you advance the next slide, you can see what the articles actually look like. So there are the titles. So the first one is written by Joelle Van Lent, our own Vermont psychologist and consultant in schools. And she's got some really good ideas about helping kids stay focused and present. And I think you might enjoy those, some of her suggestions and ideas. Some of the other ones, the focus is often on the health and the well-being of the parents. And the thing that comes back to me over and over again is the old airline adage of put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you then go and help your children. And I really do believe in times of stress, in times of extreme stress, and in times of prolonged stress, taking care of yourselves make a huge, huge, huge difference. And really, I want to anchor anything that may come from this point forward in this conversation really has to do with learning to kind of figure out what you need and make sure that you're able to get that need met. So we can go ahead. So here are some of the things that keep coming up in my reading and understanding. The first is that resilience truly can be cultivated. Early on, in the 70s and 80s, when resilience literature first came into being, they would talk about, why is it that some kids and families have incredible high numbers of ACE scores, or adverse childhood events, or severe trauma, or tremendous loss and adversity. And some of those children grow up to lead very healthy, productive, full, rich lives, and other ones really are weighted down by their pain and their suffering and have more difficulty. And so a body of research came into being to help look at, well, first of all, is resilience just good luck? Can it truly be cultivated? And the answer seems to be absolutely. There are certain skills and tools and practices that we can make use of. Those of you who were at the pediatric grand rounds last week might have heard some wonderful, rich ideas about taking some time to be very thoughtful, intentional, focus on gratitude, focus on mindfulness, focus on self awareness, think about ways of just slowing things down and focusing your attention and connecting with the people you love. And those are examples of the kinds of things that truly do build not only psychic, emotional, and spiritual resilience, but physical well being, decreasing inflammation, decreasing too many corticosteroids coursing through our bodies, helping our parasympathetic nervous systems really, really get online to help take care of us. So there are very specific things that we can do, and a lot of them don't take a lot of time. So even just beginning with breathe. And so for you, for your children, if things feel hard, anybody who has delivered a child knows that deep, slow abdominal breathing can truly be cleansing, can truly be healing, and can help just get your brain back in your body to be able to navigate a very difficult moment or set of moments. So those are some some simple examples, but there are many. The other thing that I'm finding is that all of the major spiritual, psychological, and scientific traditions keep converging around certain themes, and they include finding purpose, finding meaning, and figuring out what really, really matters to us and living in accordance with those values. When you think about Holocaust literature, or you think of other literature of people who have survived incredible trauma, that what helped is the capacity to be connected to what is still good and valued to help get you through. The other thing that I keep coming up, keeps coming up is this idea of acceptance. And now, acceptance isn't the same thing as liking something or being resigned to it. But if we can accept where we are, what is happening, and how we're feeling without judgment, just, okay, I'm sad, I'm scared, I'm still mad, I'm starting to feel really defeated and deflated. If we can accept where we are emotionally, then it's easier to start to say, okay, so now what am I going to do with that? How am I going to help my child with those same feelings? But if we say, no, 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 it's okay, we're good, we're good, we're good, when we're not good, that seems to be very difficult. So also recognizing what we do and don't know. It's really scary. And I know when Dr. Dickerson talks about anxiety, so much of what is anxiety provoking for many people is the idea that we should have control. And then when we feel a lack of control, it's terrifying. The truth is, this pandemic is showing us we don't know, and we don't have control of exactly how this is going to play out. And we can't really know until there's more understood and learned and time passes and we can really see how things play out. So accepting the idea that we're really not able to control the outcome, but we can take control of our own choices and how we live our lives and how we take care of our bodies and our spirits and our psyches. Get our rest, get our sleep, do the things that everybody keeps saying over and over again, that those things actually can make a difference in our own individual situations. The other thing that a lot of literature keeps pointing to is gratitude practice. I don't know how others are feeling, but I know I have had a little bit of survivor guilt here living in Vermont, knowing that we have space and air, and we live in a place where we don't have so many people living in such close, cramped quarters, and we don't many of us, not all of us, but many of us do have decent living conditions and air quality. So there's something very, very healing about being able to just notice that. And if you can get out for a walk, see the color of the leaves, smell the air and the freshness in the change. Those kinds of things can really make a difference. And in Vermont, we have access to them. Let me take a pause and look at some of these questions in the chat because I see they're coming through. Okay, so the first one is, how contagious is a bad attitude or being around someone who is complaining a lot? And the response was very contagious. Yeah, the idea that misery loves company, sadly it does. And so there's a distinction between recognizing that things kind of stink versus infecting people with a bad attitude. So it's okay to feel negatively about parts of what's happening. Not so okay to bring the negativity into all of our interactions with others. And it's a subtle distinction. I would love to hear if anybody who's on the call feels brave enough to turn on their camera, unmute themselves, and speak about this. Just what has been your experience with bad attitudes and how it's impacted your mood or your ability to be there for your kids? Anybody want to take that question? Okay, so I'm seeing, I try to think and talk positively, but my body language is sending a different message. If most communication is nonverbal, what can I do? Honestly, I think the best thing that we can all do is be honest. Be honest with ourselves. I want to be, something you might be able to say is, I really want to be positive. I want to think positively and talk positively, but I'm having a really rough morning. I don't want to get political, but whether it's the election cycle, whether it's, national issues around us on top of the pandemic, whether it's not being able to find a quiet space in your home to work and think because you're trying to monitor your children's schooling and giving them space, whatever the thing is that's impinging upon you and getting in the way of feeling resilient and bolstered, if you could just allow yourself to name it and accept that that's where it is, that will make a difference. Then you can say to someone, I'm sorry, I actually need to not have this conversation because I'm afraid I can't bring anything good to it. I'm having a rough day. I'm actually feeling pretty hopeless. And I don't want to, I don't want to bring that to you. So how about we talk about this later or another time? That's an example of something that you can do with that in the moment. Does anybody else have any thoughts about how you're managing, negativity or negative, just bad attitude in general, in terms of how it's impacting your children or how it's impacting others? So I see it's hard not to get into a negative spiral where you're feeling down, and that makes it harder to do the good things you should, like breathe, go for a walk. So then you feel worse and so on. Right. So great thought. Here's the thing that I hope we can all do. Go easy on yourself. Be gentle. So there's like the thought bubbles. There's the what we wish we could do. So some people are writing about, if you have more time because you're not commuting to work, or if you're not spending as much money as you were before, use this time as an opportunity to create some good habits. And so there might be some people who are actually cooking more and eating well and getting out and exercising. And that's great. And if you can do it, absolutely it will be helpful. If for some reason you're just not there, then please be gentle with yourselves and just say, okay, where I am today is in the stages of change model. I want to do those things. I'm just not there right now. So for today, can I just be accepting of the fact that I'm not in a space where I'm able to access the things I know might be helpful. So what might I do? Can you just shut your eyes and listen to some nice music? Can you write? Do a little journaling? Can you call someone that you've been really missing and meaning to talk with. I know people have screen fatigue, but would a FaceTime or Google Hangouts or a Zoom call to a friend or a family member be helpful? What can you do? And if it's nothing, okay, maybe next hour will be different. But the idea of giving yourself the freedom and the flexibility to just do your best, I think that goes a really, really long way. And one of the things that this is making me think is, when we're watching the kids and we're thinking, I'm not seeing a lot of motivation. I'm not seeing much engagement. And honestly, like, who can blame them? Sitting in front of a screen is not the same as interacting with, your classmates. If that's the case, if it's possible to do the work in a shared space, at least for part of the time, and then to be able to just check in with, like, have you come across anything interesting? Anything, are you learning anything that speaks to you? And if the answer is no, then okay. So then it's about, this is an endurance task, it's a marathon. What do you need to help get through it? Can I help you with this? Can we just, get up and change the scenery for a little bit and then get back to it? Here's a question. Can you share any practices or habits that parents and children have started together? Yes. So I hear some really creative things. I've heard some families are taking turns with cooking, and just like, where it didn't happen before, but now they're doing it. They're cooking together, or they're letting one child be in charge of making the menu, or participating in the food shopping and in the prep, and then the parent becomes the sous chef to the child, which is really kind of fun. The other thing that I found and really, really helpful is kids, especially teens and young adults, they're plugged into really funny comedy. So spending some time just saying to your kids who are on their screens, could you just share a comedy act, or could you send me a clip, or can we all look at something really, really funny together? Because a good hearty laugh is so healing. So let them guide you and introduce you to some cool things. The other things I'm hearing is young people are really jazzed, passionate, and motivated about making the world better right now. And so working with them on a project, whether it's a fundraising project or an informational, project, or voter registration drive, or anything that speaks to them, where you can see them get engaged and enthusiastic about something, if they're able to do that and you can partner with them, or at least learn about it with them, that's the kind of thing that I think injects some purpose and meaning and joy and new energy, which is, could be really, really cool. I do realize that this pandemic is hitting us all very differently depending on our circumstances. Where are we living? Do we live in cramped quarters? Do we have decent air quality? Are we working? Have we been hit really hard economically? Is someone very, very ill? Is my child's social isolation really, really hurting my child? And so there are no one size fits all answers, because really our circumstances are so different. But take it one step at a time and learn from each other. I'm seeing a really nice a couple of additional inputs. I've taught my children ages 9 to 12 to cook homemade mac and cheese, and they make it one day a week for lunch while I'm working from home. Helps them socialize, keeps them busy so I can get something done. Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm hearing as well, which seems so cool. I'm playing the role as my child's teacher, and that creates challenges for my child when I switch back to my mom role. Any ideas on how to make these transitions easier? My child likes me as mom much more than their teacher. Oh, I can only imagine. For me, this may seem artificial and contrived, but different spaces. If you can create some space, one sec, sorry, I'm distracted by a question. So let me just do this. If you can create some space in the house that's for school, that's different from home, that might make it a little easier to switch. If you can't do that, then depending on your child's ages, Are you teacher or are you facilitator? Are you teacher, facilitator, or monitor? If there's a role where they can teach you more, you think of those flipped classrooms where the kids do the learning and then the teacher is there to kind of help with, well, what did we get? What do we do with this information? There may be specific roles that you can take that feel less onerous to them and then allow you to shift gears. But it does seem like in the parent role, if you can be the emotional container, if you could be the one to really check in on, like, where are you? How are we all doing? If you could be the one to inject a little fun, a little normalcy, a little perspective to counteract some of the, drill sergeant aspects of being the teacher, that may also help. It's, I feel like we're in such uncharted territory. We do have a lot to learn from the families who have done homeschooling for years and years and years. Although a lot of homeschooling before still had kids interacting with each other in groups, there, as opposed to just, engaging with a screen. But I do think that we have a lot to learn from people who have been at this longer. Go ahead and advance the next slide and we'll see if there's anything further in there. Yeah, okay. So this sort of answers the question that somebody had asked before about, like, and are there any new traditions or new rituals or new things that we can think about that might help to make better use of this time? Well, one thought I had was the focusing on helpers and positivity. When 9/11 happened and everybody was devastated, one of the things that did seem to be helpful was focusing on the helpers and focusing on the outpouring of love and sort of shared energy and goodness that we could see, where we saw evidence of people going out of their way. Same thing happened with the sort of hurricane tropical storm Irene here, where suddenly people are bringing food and helping dry basements and that sort of thing. So if there are things that your kids can be doing and you as a family could be doing to, make sure that our neighbors, our older neighbors have some support, and that, people are being attended to and people are being adequately fed, and, and you're part of that positive solution, that can make a huge difference. The risk mitigation comment on this slide that I'm thinking about is, some parents have said to me, well, I do want my kids to socialize with other kids, but I don't trust how careful some of my kids' families are. They're not masking, they're not social distancing. So I'm afraid to let my child play or study with or hang out with that other family. So that's interesting. To me, that reminds me of, if you're the parent of an adolescent and it's time to start thinking about, do I let my kid go to, gatherings with other kids? Do I extend curfew? Do I get rid of curfew? Do I allow, sleepovers at people's houses where I think there may be multiple genders at those homes? It all starts with, well, do you know the other families? Do you and the other families have a shared vision of what's okay and what's not okay? Is there adequate supervision? The same kind of thinking of, well, what do I need to know about the other child, the other family, how safe they are or are not keeping themselves from this virus? That sort of thing, that information might help you decide how widely you can extend your bubble. I'm seeing a nice comment: no matter what I do, they're still hyper-focused. Any ideas to ease their concerns? Sharing a possible helpful resource, a workshop that was part of our series, Wordless Humor and the Element of Surprise to Increase Connection with Older Kids and Tweens at Home, by Sarah Forward. Yeah, that sounds like it was wonderful. I will look forward to seeing that also. So, okay, so how do you ease your kids' concerns when they're still hyper-focused? So I think we do kind of what Dr. Fauci is asking for, which is provide the information that we do have. What we know is that certain things that we can do are helpful. And we can think about what's working here in Vermont and in our schools. We have this lucky situation where we've got a nonpartisan, bipartisan rather, effort to make good, thoughtful choices. So if we can say to our children, I know it's very scary, but let's look at how Vermont is doing. Let's think about what we're doing. You are wearing a mask, you are social distancing, your school has a really nice, thoughtful plan. If we do learn that somebody has tested positive, we will learn about that and we'll know that we're going to get back to being contained and we're going to keep away from others and we're going to learn what's going on for us and for our family. And we will do the best that we can. And thankfully, not only are our rates in Vermont very low, but the rate of death is really low. So thankfully, not only are we making good preventive steps, taking good preventive steps, but we're also fortunate that our hospitals and our healthcare system is prepared and is able to take care of us if we need it. So I think we can focus on what is working, and that might help the kids to kind of see, like, listen, it's not crazy to be nervous. This is a frightening situation, and let's put it in perspective. Some of the I know Dr. Dickerson will talk about this more, but some of the strategies that help with anxiety management, they're two schools of thought. So one is we help our kids be detectives or little scientists and say, well, what's the evidence for the likelihood that you are personally at risk? And we can go through and sort of showing them that their level of worry is a little larger than it needs to be given the circumstances. So that's one sort of the cognitive behavioral exposure based and sort of rational thinking based approach to anxiety. The other piece to that school of thought is if we expose ourselves to the things that scare us in gradual metabolizable amounts, that helps the anxiety come down. If you've ever been afraid to fly, if you don't have to fly, then your fear of flying is probably going to stay pretty darn big. But if you did have to fly several flights, you'd probably get acclimated enough to be able to manage. The other way to look at it comes more from an ACT or acceptance commitment therapy model, which is the don't fight the anxiety, just sit with it. Okay, so I'm having really scary thoughts. I'm imagining, this is your child, I'm imagining the worst. I'm imagining that we're all going to get sick and we're all going to die. Okay, that thought, let me see how that makes me feel. Oh my God, my chest is tight, my muscles are tight, my stomach hurts. Okay, so can you see how that thought, that particular expectation is actually creating that distress in your body? You've created that anxiety and that felt experience of anxiety with that thought. So you have a choice. You can say, okay, let me just accept that that's where my mind goes. I'm scared. Okay. But the more I focus on that particular outcome, the more uncomfortable I am. If I can return to the present, don't get so ahead of myself. Don't assume that that's going to happen. Recognize that it's a possibility in my mind. It's not a high likelihood, but thinking about it and dwelling on it and keeping my focus on the future is actually keeping me very anxious. So if I could bring back to where are we right now? What evidence do I have right now for how we're doing? No one in my class is sick. No one in my family is sick. No one in my neighborhood is sick. Those that have been are doing okay. We actually have got this pretty well as we can. I'm gonna attend to right now. I'm gonna attend to that mac and cheese we're making. I'm gonna focus on what I've got going on right here, right now. And that does seem to be centering. Focusing too much in the future gets us anxious. Focusing too much on the past sometimes makes us sad. Bringing us to the present can be particularly helpful. I see a nice question. How important are predictable routines to families and children? Does it really make that much of a difference? My kids stay up really later on the weekends, and it's hard to get back into the swing of things every Monday morning. So this does depend a little on your particular children, but there's for the school week, routine in terms of predictable, fairly consistent bedtimes, meal times, where we do school, when we do school, those sorts of things really can be very grounding and helpful. Having said that, adolescents, absolutely, unless you're letting them stay up till crazy late and start their day crazy late, their natural rhythm is going to be different than the one that our school life asks of them. So if they on the weekends do need to kind of down regulate a little bit and do more of what they naturally want to do, I think that can be okay. But yes, it will make it harder to get in the swing of things. So what you may want to do is, have it allow for some flexibility, but still within some parameters. And really, just because as they discover Monday's hard. If you can't do that, I honestly wouldn't sweat it, but I would focus more on your weekday routines to the best of your ability. And then on the weekends, I would just, depending on their ages, I would encourage some, with curiosity rather than like an agenda, some reflection on their parts about how it's going. Like, I see how nice it is to just have the freedom to go to bed really, really late. I also see that Monday morning is hard. How are you feeling about that? Do you feel like there's something that needs to shift? Is it working for you? And just let them kind of explore it a little bit. That might help them to figure out on their own that they need a subtle shift. Okay, so I'm a service coordinator for individuals with developmental disabilities. The youngest on my caseload is 14, the oldest is 78. One of my girls has cystic fibrosis, so her mom understandably is very concerned about her in-person contact with respite workers. However, her mom is struggling between work and being the primary caregiver provider for her needs. I've offered outdoor in-person visits to give mom a break, but she hasn't accepted. What kinds of things could a parent with a child with developmental disabilities do at home to also take care of themselves? Wow, that's very, very challenging. I can totally appreciate all of that. So let me try to take it in steps. So the girl with cystic fibrosis. So, okay, so mom is nervous about allowing respite workers to come in. So that then puts mom in the position of being it. Does mom feel comfortable having contact with others herself that are socially distant? Because one thought might be, if mom won't accept her daughter to be in proximity with somebody else, but somehow she will allow herself to be outside, but well more than 6 feet away, just to, go for a walk with someone or get some space that way, that might be something that could be offered while her daughter is safely occupied doing something else. The you know this is hard. I honestly don't know. I don't have a clear universal thought, but the kinds of things that come to my mind are things that don't take so long. So, if the mom can read or listen to a podcast, if the mom would give herself time for a long hot shower, if there's any kind of exercise equipment in the home and mom could get on a bike or a treadmill while the daughter is within close proximity, if mom could just vary her routine with a dedicated, intentional focus on her own well-being for 15 minutes, that kind of a thing might be just helpful to anchor her in the idea that I know that when you have a child with a developmental disability, your life revolves around making sure that your child is well and cared for. I so appreciate that. And if you can give something to yourself, you will see things more clearly. It might help you to know, oh, I thought I wasn't open to that, but this might actually be okay. Or still not open to that, but I'm willing to bundle us all up and sit outside and just at least breathe in some good air and do it a little bit differently. So I think it really is about knowing what you need, being really clear about your feelings, having an outlet for them. Maybe as a caseworker, you can just be that. You could be the voice, you could be the listener, you could be the ear. We all need to be seen and heard. And if that's the best that you could bring, it's more than enough. So those are some of the things that I'm just thinking about, is things that don't take long, things that don't require you to leave. Does anybody else have a question, or does the person who read that chat have the courage to get rid of show your camera and then say more about this? Because I think what you're asking, I'm sure other families are thinking about too. So maybe you can share some ideas with each other.
Yeah, hi. I don't know if you can see me. I can't see
Yeah,
my own camera.
yeah,
Hi. Yeah, so, as a caseworker, it definitely is really hard because, I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I just graduated college. I'm just just thrown to this as much as anyone else. So I'm just kind of trying to brainstorm. And we work a lot on team meetings with the girls' ABA team as well, and like the principal and things like that. And yeah, it's tough because moms sometimes can just be very resistant to solutions that are offered. And it's definitely difficult with the cystic fibrosis that her daughter has because, mom's job, she works at a nursing home.
hmm
So already there's concern there. So her hours have been cut, and um, it's just her and her daughter at home, and she has a very high level of needs. And so I think between being the primary care provider, like caregiver, at home, and then, also being the ABA team and also being an outlet for Shannon to talk to and like all these things, um, she's definitely overwhelmed.
yeah. So can you ask her just, how can I help? What is it that you might need that I might be able to offer?
Mm.
Because you know how it feels when we try so hard to offer solutions and the person on the other end is like, yeah, nope, nope, nope. So, but sometimes there's a good reason for that, right? The resistance might be, sorry, but I don't trust anybody else to be with my child. So anything you're offering on that score is not is not on the table.
Yeah.
Or and there could be 75 million other possibilities. But if you could just say, listen, I'm here and I'd like very much to be a force of good in your life. Is there anything I can do for you?
Yeah.
I don't know. Does she need somebody to go to the grocery store? Does she need somebody just to listen? Does she need somebody to play a game with her daughter? Just like I honestly don't know. But I find sometimes when I'm like constantly rattling off solutions, I'm realizing they're not looking for solutions. It's like, I hate to be gender based, but it's sort of like when a woman tells her male partner something and he keeps saying, well, how about this? Well, how about that? And she's like, I don't want a solution. I don't want advice. I don't want guidance. I just want you to hear me. I just want you to listen. I'm not
Yeah.
in that place. So I wonder if there's something that you could learn about what she might find helpful
Yeah.
that can help you to not work so hard at the stuff that she's not looking for.
Yeah, just kind of leave it open ended, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate the input.
Yeah. Does anybody have anything to add for Tegan? Because I can't imagine that this is the first time this question has come up. Yeah. If anybody wants to, please unmute. If you can turn your camera on, go ahead. I'm seeing a question. Are there any Facebook groups that people have found during the pandemic that you'd recommend to others? Vermont Family Networks has a close Facebook group for parents only, and search the name Vermont Family of Children with Special Health Care Needs. So are there, I don't know of any personally. Do others know of any Facebook groups that you're finding helpful or other supportive outlets? I mean, I realize there's so much social media and, this is tricky because I know some people are saying, I can't look at a screen for any more reasons. Like I'm just fried from it. But then other people are saying, yeah, but you know what? I've read a couple of Twitter, a couple of tweets. I find them inspiring and encouraging. And so, I think being judicious and selective about what you choose to put into your brain and what kind of input and information you choose to absorb and consume is a really, really, really wise thing to think about. But there's actually some good stuff out there. I'm seeing, how do you suggest parents create circles of support when it's not possible to do those in person right now? So this is, okay, clearly a creative challenge. I have a couple of different thoughts about that. One is, where you can do it, outside for as long as we can, go ahead. And that really might mean like 2 or 3 people with masks, but go for a walk together. The movement and the looking at everything around you might really be so restorative that it's worth connecting on that level. The other possibility is if you do know about people's practices, you could choose an indoor venue that is big enough for you to have lots of space to be socially distanced and masked. And if you're comfortable with this, this may or may not work. But for those of you who are still working in work settings, you're seeing that it's being set up in such a way wherever possible to have people indoors but distant. So if that's possible, that might be a good thing. And at the risk of overwhelming you with more Zoom, I know, in for some people, a weekly game night on Zoom has been like, I'm hearing that that's a really fun thing. I know some people are doing a weekly or at least a every other week get together on Zoom with people they respect and trust just to be able to let off steam together. I'm seeing, oh, I just missed, there was a comment above that said, what suggestions do you have for successful telehealth counseling therapy sessions with parents and children? Do you speak separately to the parents and children depending on the child's age? Yes. So I am finding what people are telling me about Zoom therapy sessions is, here's the quote, it's so much better than nothing. So while most people, if not all people, are saying, oh, I really look forward to being able to get back into the office, I'm also hearing people say, I have acclimated to this and I appreciate it. So if you had individual sessions before, they can be maintained. If you did family therapy sessions before, they can be maintained. If you're embarking on a new relationship with a clinician, whether it's individual or family, depends on the age. It depends on the concerns that you have about your young person or their concerns. And it also depends on the theoretical orientation of the clinician. So, my practice when I don't do this anymore, but when I used to see very young kids, was I always saw parents first, listened to all their concerns, and then decided, do I meet with the child? Do I meet with the children and parents only? Do I just provide parent guidance? So depending on what the issue is that you're looking for support for, that would be kind of the deciding factor and whether or not it's individual versus together. For some kids who are reluctant to meet, sometimes starting with parents and then bringing the child in has been helpful. Other times it's, well, let's all start together. And then if the child feels comfortable sending you packing, then the parents can leave the session. So it really does depend a little bit on the age and the nature of the concern. I see for us, completely unrelated things have been helpful. We just started farming last fall and joining a lot of goat-related Facebook groups that provide great distraction for all of us. So maybe look for Facebook groups that are for other interests you're trying to cultivate, or follow museums and other cultural things. Especially early on, there were a lot of free streaming Broadway shows, museum tours, etc. Absolutely, those are all great ideas. And I do think some of those things still exist. There's tons of theater, culture, art, music, free courses, podcasts. There's so much out there. But yes, getting outside if you can, the farming, the growing, dealing with nature and plants and focusing on the living can be so incredibly helpful. Oh, Tegan has a recommendation to the telehealth. Go ahead, please do unmute and share.
Yes, sure. Yeah, so service coordination, also like part of my role is scheduling regular med checks for the patients that do intake through our agency. So I recently actually had one of my individuals who was very reluctant to continue med checks with our psychiatrist. He was about 27, I think, and just wasn't really a big fan of the way that our psychiatrist was working with him. So what I had recommended and the way I got him to kind of agree to schedule one and continue is that it's like, okay, well, you have to do med checks. You need your medication. That's not really an option. So how about I will sign on and join for each of the med checks. And as well as that, I will allot in my schedule 30 minutes before the med check so that we can talk. And if there's anything that you're not comfortable saying to our psychiatrist directly on Zoom, you tell me and I will advocate for you.
Wow.
That way it still gets across, but if it's something that's kind of critical towards her practice or anything like that, it's a coworker telling her in like more professional ways rather than the patient feeling uncomfortable or the psychiatrist feeling like they're being attacked, things like that.
Mhm.
And then also after the med check, I allot half an hour as a debrief session where I call him after and I say, okay, how do you think that went? How do you feel about the med change? What are your thoughts for the next one? Is there anything after this appointment that you think that she should know? And then I take those notes, I write it up in an email and I send it to Kay.
So how has that gone?
So far, really good.
Yeah,
um,
it sounds like it would.
yeah,
I mean, I think that sounds like a really creative and collaborative solution. And I think that's so important, right? Because the young person needs to feel like I'm a partner in this healthcare relationship. I'm not comfortable with people just doing things to me. So I think you were able to really work with that young person's autonomy and agency in a way that sounds really, really powerful.
thank you.
Thank you for
Yeah,
that.
he agreed to future med checks. He was pretty happy with the way that the one we did went. Um, and that's, I think, a really important part with kind of telehealth and counseling, therapy, psychiatrist sessions is that, you know, because we're not in person, I feel like people are losing that sense of autonomy. Like they feel like they're just on a computer, they're just in the system, like they're not a person anymore. They're not being spoken to. It's just, I have 1 hour on Zoom and then that's it.
Yeah,
And if I run overtime, I get cut off. Like,
gotcha.
yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I'm gonna shift gears just quickly because I see we're running out of time. Rachel had an interesting window swap link that shows people's views out of their windows from all over the world. And so, and then there's a link to the ultimate guide to the virtual museum resources, online collection. There's the link to the window swap. So some really lovely things to be able to look at and think about. Can we just go to the last couple of slides to just make sure? No, so it was just our questions, so we're fine with that. Okay. Does anybody have last minute, because we're going to close, so any last minute thought or burning need to just make sure that something is addressed before we shift gears? Okay, well, then I'm just going to say I want to thank you for your time and your attention and your interest. I think that, it sounds like people are doing the very best they can and actually doing pretty darn well. If people are suffering and struggling, I hope you don't feel like that means that there's something wrong with how you're doing it. This is super, super hard for everybody. And I would just say continuing to be open and curious will go a very long way. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marin, for today's excellent